What's up guys, welcome back. This is anime fiction. You'll be watching What If Naruto Was the Allspark in Transformers: The End. Now, let's begin. As Optimus stepped into the tree, he quickly noticed that it was way bigger than it seemed from the outside. Plants, vines, and moss draped down all around, surrounding what looked like a grand throne crafted from wooden roots. The place was really beautiful, filled with thick greenery, but there was definitely a noticeable darkness from the limited light. Small robotic fireflies lit up the area gently, creating a calm and peaceful vibe, almost like a spiritual spot perfect for meditation. Even with the faint glow from the fireflies, Optimus could see that the throne was empty. But that didn't mean he was by himself, especially with that unsettling feeling of being watched. The female voice echoed in the ancient language of Cybertron, catching the last prime off guard as he searched for where it was coming from. Optimus was a bit confused by what the female voice had just said, but based on how she sounded, he figured she was probably asking him who he was. "I'm Optimus Prime, the leader of the Autobots. I wanted to chat about finding a fair and mutual agreement regarding the situation between the forest and the humans, a peace treaty. Let's find a way to make peace without any weapons or sharp teeth, so both sides can benefit." Optimus glanced around, trying to pinpoint where that female voice was coming from. "Why would I go along with a deal like that when these humans are known for being violent and have already attacked my people?" a woman's voice said. Optimus' eyes lit up as he suddenly grasped that he could finally understand and interpret the female voice perfectly. He could really feel the leadership matrix at work for him and was thankful for all the support he was getting. Humans are still figuring things out and don't really understand the universe yet, so when you showed up out of nowhere, it made them scared and a bit aggressive. As soon as I became aware, all I wanted was to safeguard this forest and help life thrive. But then, these humans came along and attacked me for no reason, putting the well-being of my home at risk." The woman's voice grew even more irritated, causing the ground to tremble a bit with her emotions. "If you really value life so much, then why did you end up hurting people? They're just as much a part of this planet's ecological system as any other native species." Optimus couldn't help but snap, giving the forest guardian a bit of a scolding. In a natural environment, everything is connected in a delicate balance. Each animal plays its part, helping life thrive and keeping the food chain running smoothly from the smallest creatures to the largest. No matter how small or seemingly insignificant an animal is, whether it's an insect or something larger, each one plays an important role in the ecosystem. There's no inequality here, just balance and prosperity all around. But if a tiny creature, even something as small as an insect, gets taken out of its natural home and dropped into a different ecosystem, it can really cause chaos. It might turn into a plague and wipe out a whole bunch of species, leading to a serious decline in all the plants and animals around. The female voice explained, making Optimus feel thoughtful and a bit anxious that the conversation could go in a direction he didn't want. "Optimus Prime, can you explain what sets humanity apart from a plague? Are you planning to get rid of humanity?" Optimus tensed up, his fists clenching instinctively when he heard those words. "In the short time I've been watching people, it seems like they've caused more harm than good. I just want to say that I'm all about protecting innocent animals and making sure they're safe. But honestly, I think it might be time to consider getting rid of humans, like the plagues they can be, so the planet can thrive without all that interference from a dominant civilization." The female voice went on, clearly expressing her view of humanity as a barbaric and savage species, believing there's no way we could thrive in harmony with nature. "I can see where you're coming from. Humanity definitely has its violent side, and it's still figuring things out as a relatively new species. But you know what? I've also witnessed some really good things in people. Freedom belongs to every sentient being." Optimus shared his thoughts, ready to make sacrifices to protect what he held dear in his spark. "You've only caught a glimpse of the darker side of humanity, but there's so much more to see. People can be incredibly strong and do amazing good. They really value honor, respect, and justice. Every person is one of a kind, flourishing in their own special ways. Even though you and I are different from them, just like we are, there's more to them than what you see at first glance." For a few minutes, There was just silence while Optimus waited for the female voice to chime in. She was really taken aback by how the last prime viewed the world. "I have to say, you really know how to use words." The woman let out a little sigh as she admitted it. "You've got quite a bit of faith in this species, huh? If we only look at the world from one angle and don't take a moment to look around, we're really missing out and being a bit clueless." Optimus spoke up once more, catching the female consciousness of the forest off guard. "I get that you're feeling pretty down about people right now, but honestly, they're just scared. If they realize this is all just a misunderstanding, things could really turn around." "What makes your words trustworthy?" the woman's voice inquired, still a bit wary. "I saw my planet fade away. My friends, my comrades, and someone really special to me all faced the fallout from my inability to stop a guy the first considered my brother from pushing the war to its ultimate end and turning our planet into a place we can't live on anymore." Optimus shared his feelings with a hint of sadness. "I found myself lost in my dreams, wishing I could go back and change my brother's fate. But, you know, war was always going to happen. It was just a question of who would make the first move that would set Cybertron ablaze. If we find ourselves caught in a loop of anger, mistrust, or betrayal, it can really take a toll on our future. I lost my planet because of that mistake, and you might end up facing the same fate with this one." The female consciousness observed Optimus with a sense of sympathy, recognizing the heavy burden that the last prime carried. As they chatted, she noticed that Optimus had the same ideals as her, just from different angles, which helped her grasp the last prime's words even better. "You can't have evil without good, and good doesn't exist without evil." A funny twist of fate. "It sounds like you're saying that your words suggest you had the power to stop your brother in the war, but you chose not to because you held on to the hope that he had some goodness inside him." Optimus was taken aback when he heard a female voice interpreting his speech. It was surprising because, for the first time, someone truly understood why he had never taken the opportunity to kill the Decepticon leader. Megatron's vision isn't necessarily bad, but sometimes the folks who chase after those ideals can twist them. Optimus found himself briefly drifting into memories from the past. You know, power can really mess with people when they want it too much. But when someone gets power because they really need it, not just because they want it, it can actually give them the strength to stand up for what they believe in without losing their way. Optimus placed his hand on his chest for a moment, sensing the strength of the matrix of leadership. "Hope isn't a curse, Optimus Prime, it's what defines us." The woman's voice came through in a soothing, more tranquil manner. "I really believe in protecting the forest and all its amazing creatures, but I won't think twice about using all my strength to defend what I care about." Just as Optimus was about to say something, a layer of liquid metal started to gather in front of him. It used the metal floor to shape itself into a body that gradually resembled a human form, catching the Prime off guard. The humanoid figure gradually grew taller, reaching an impressive 12 meters. It took on a feminine shape, adorned with gold and silver accents and a hint of greenish details, showcasing a strikingly curvaceous silhouette. What really stood out about her feminine form were those striking golden wings. They looked like 3 big metallic feathers on each side, almost like a delicate metallic fabric when you looked closely. Finally showing herself to Optimus, the female figure strolled over to her throne and sat down with ease, crossing her legs like a queen or a goddess. When she opened her eyes, they glowed with a striking orange hue, radiating a sense of grandeur. "I haven't had the chance to introduce myself yet. I don't really have a set name, but you can just call me Gia." Gia smiled, her eyes sparkling, but inside, she was secretly watching the incredible energy that Optimus held within him. "I'm really interested in hearing about you. Can you share your story about you and your brother? Can you share how you and your brother ended up where you are now?" Cybertron, millions of years earlier, twilight of the Golden Age city, IACON. Knock knock knock, are you seriously going to make me wait out here? Alita-1 let out a sigh, crossing her arms and pursing her lips in frustration. The rather commanding pink Cybertronian was standing at the door of the big archive hall of IACON, tapping their foot impatiently. This public library sometimes gets locked up because its owner tends to forget about it. The locked automatic door swung open, and there stood an old Cybertronian, towering at 12 meters tall. He glanced down at the smaller 4-meter female Cybertronian, making her instinctively take a step back at the sight of him. "Sir Alpha, oh wow, I didn't think I'd run into you here," Alita-1 said, feeling a bit intimidated by the librarian's unusual height. "I live here, you know. I really don't have anywhere else to go," Alpha said, sounding a bit worn out and a touch irritable. "Oh no, I forgot, once more. So, does it really matter? Is Orion lost in books over here?" Alita-1 asked, placing her hands behind her back and looking to steer the conversation in a different direction. "Ugh, teenagers. He's right where he usually is, just head down the hallway." Alpha reached out his arm toward the dim, a bit dusty hallway. A legendary warrior turned simple librarian, he strolled alongside Alita-1 to ensure she didn't lose her way, something she had a knack for, despite being a regular visitor. Unfortunately, she wasn't really into the history of Cybertron, unlike Orion Pax, who always kept him company. The legendary library had hundreds of millions of data points just waiting to be explored, but sadly, it seems like the current generation of Cybertronians isn't too interested in the rich history that Cybertron once celebrated during its prime. It turns out the library was mostly a spot for a handful of enthusiasts, some older Cybertronians, and military folks looking to dive into the past and get a grip on military strategies by exploring ancient tales of famous battles. Absolutely, knowledge is definitely a game changer. This old librarian was pretty selective about what he let people learn. He kept some information from the past tucked away behind other details, holding on to the real history of Cybertron just in his own mind. Alpha, a grumpy old librarian who used to be known as Alpha Trion, one of the original 13 primes, has spent thousands of years trying to change a specific moment in Cybertronian history. He's been hiding things to stop the same mistakes from happening again, which means not many people know who he really is anymore. He's just a shadow of the man who was once one of Cybertron's leaders. Some might think his decision was pretty harsh and full of himself, but honestly, it was the smartest move given everything he experienced. Prima Prime's final wish was for him to keep any info about legendary weapons and artifacts from the first era of Cybertron under wraps, including the Prime's weapons, which had turned into mere legends over time. This place could really use a good cleaning. Alita-1 mentioned that she was really bothered by how messy the place was. "Ugh, my back is already aching just at the thought of cleaning all this up. It would be so much easier if your boyfriend could lend a hand, but instead, he's off diving into those historical archives for hours." Alpha chimed in, thinking to himself that it was definitely time to tidy up the place. Alita-1 felt a rush of warmth and quickly set the record straight with the old librarian and Orion Pax's mentor. "He's not my boyfriend, he's just a friend," Alita-1 said, a bit uncertain. "I've had enough of this drama, I'm just too old for it." Alpha let out a tired sigh. Alita-1 she glanced at Alpha, feeling a bit uncertain, and found herself curious about his age. She realized she didn't really know many older Cybertronians, or at least not many who appeared to be old. "Alpha, how old are you? You won't believe this," Alpha responded with a sarcastic tone, his voice sounding quite grumpy. The two walked into one of the big rooms in the library, right where the general information pillar was. This was the spot where all the available info came together. They noticed several holographic screens surrounding this shiny silver pillar, covered in Cybertronian symbols. In the middle of it all stood a 6-meter-tall robot, decked out in blue and red, focused on learning, looking really serious and concentrated. "Pax, did you forget what day it is?" Alita-1 stood there with her hands on her hips, looking at Orion Pax, clearly waiting for his response, but it was pretty obvious he wasn't paying her any attention at all. "Wait, he just ignored me. He really gets lost in his studies. I often have to literally chase him with a metal bat to snap him back to reality." Alpha, clearly worn out, suddenly grabbed a metal stick and tossed it at Orion's head. "That's all right, I've got my own ways of doing things." Alita-1 gave a little stretch and puffed out her chest. "Pax," she let out a scream, which made the future leader of the Autobots jump and tumble to the ground in a funny way. Check it out. This is a library. Is the idea of silence just not a thing for you? Orion grumbled as he stood up from the floor, feeling a bit dizzy from his tumble. Do you actually understand what a calendar and time are all about? Do you remember what day it is? Alita-1 crossed her arms, feeling a bit annoyed as she noticed how confused Orion looked. Today is the big day. You said you'd be there for him. Orion Pax's eyes went wide with shock as he finally understood what Alita-1 was trying to say. Is today the day? I was pretty sure it was in 10 days. It's been over 10 days, you nerd. Alita-1 grabbed Orion Pax's hand and guided him toward the exit, leaving the old librarian scratching his head in confusion. Where are you headed? Alpha was bursting with curiosity. We're heading to the arena to watch Megatronis take on the Grand Champion. Alita-1 called out, guiding Orion the wrong way at first, but then quickly set him straight as they left the library. Megatronis, Alpha whispered, a weight settling in his spark as memories of his past flickered through his mind for a moment. He quickly got himself together and took a good look at what was going on. Orion mentioned that he isn't a fan of the gladiator arenas. Oh, I just remembered. D16, that young gladiator, is actually old friends with Orion. Now it all makes sense. This day really means a lot to both of them. Alpha Trion took a moment to look over the files his apprentice was going through. He really didn't want to dwell on the harsh realities of the Count arenas, which were a total contradiction to Cybertronian laws. It's worth noting that more than 90% of the gladiators were actually slaves, pushed into fighting each other to the death just to entertain the crowd, something he really can't stand. Orion and D16 go way back, but it's a bummer they don't get to hang out much. D16 is stuck in the arena, battling every day for a shot at freedom. City. IACON noticing he was all by himself in his big library, Alpha Trion figured it was time to head to his office, where there were plenty of shelves full of files waiting to be organized. He walked over to his desk and pressed a button tucked away underneath it. Suddenly, a secret passage behind the desk swung open, showing an old elevator that looked a bit worn out. The elevator descended 3 floors before finally coming to a halt at a heavily armored golden door. The golden door featured a clear blue circle symbol with the Autobot emblem right in the middle. Alpha Trion placed his hand right at the center of the circle, and just like that, the door swung open to show a pristine white room, perfectly kept and preserved. The room wasn't huge, but it held something really significant in Cybertronian culture. It was the infamous and secret vault of IACON, the hidden arsenal of the Primes, where some of their mystical relics were stored. It might sound crazy, but the biggest military arsenal is actually right under a public library. And you know what? That was the plan all along. Who would ever think that such powerful weapons would be hidden in such an unexpected spot? To the public, the library was just a place for historical records, nothing else. Alpha Trion let out a weary sigh as he gazed at the collection of relics, each one brimming with memories and tales from his own history. He walked over to one of the tables and grabbed a sturdy disc that was just sitting there. His fingers gently traced the shape of the object, even though this unassuming item was actually the most powerful armor out there, the Apex armor. Before her passing, Solus Prime crafted one final creation, a power that could empower even the weakest bot to match the physical strength, defense, and basic resilience of the 13 Primes. Every creation of Solus Prime deserved respect, no doubt about it, but this artifact was something truly special. It was the last legacy she had crafted. Alpha Trion glanced at the wall and noticed Solus Prime's forge, with a massive hammer resting horizontally on it. The old Prime walked around the room for a bit, lightly brushing his fingers over the blade of the Star Saber. It was always kept so sharp that it could take down an entire city with just one swing. Prima's main weapon, along with the mold of Solus Prime, was displayed on the wall, its enormous and magical powers just waiting to be unleashed against the forces of evil. For this legendary warrior, the most treasured item in the room wasn't his brother's weapons or the relics from his past adventures. It was an old photograph printed on metal that held a special place in his heart. Alpha Trion picked up the photo, gently brushing off the dust with his fingers, showing a surprising tenderness for someone of his size. He looked like he wished he could go back and change things, do them differently while he still had the chance. The photo was pretty straightforward, but it captured the original 13 Primes after their battle with Unicron, back when they were all united as one. Out of nowhere, his eyes suddenly brightened for a moment, and it was like his mind just switched off for a bit. When he came back to reality, his face was a picture of shock as he caught a glimpse of a chaotic future waiting for him. He glanced down and noticed he had dropped the photo, which sent his thoughts spiraling back to a tumultuous past. It was a time when everything had gone up in flames because of that battle, and it hit him that the chaos that once engulfed Cybertron was on the verge of returning. ****** City. Yakan Portal Network Elita. There's no way we can get through the portals. Orion whispered, keeping an eye on Elita-1 as she strolled casually toward one of the most secure spots of the Old Guard, or Royal Guard, the army tasked with safeguarding Cybertron, which had taken over the roles of the ancient and legendary Knights of Cybertron. Elita-1 glanced at Orion Pax, her frustration barely concealed, a slight twitch in her eye giving her away. If you hadn't forgotten the big day, I wouldn't have had to come all the way from Count to pick you up. She yelled, stomping her feet on the ground. I just want to say it wasn't my fault. Orion stepped back a bit, feeling a little scared of her. If we miss even a single minute of the arena performance, I'm coming for you myself and sending you to the Allspark in style. Elita-1 threatened, causing Orion to instinctively pull back in fear, pondering why women had to be so complicated. Elita-1 strolled over to a guard who was eyeing them with interest. He held a spear in his hand and slammed it into the ground to show he meant business. Just a heads up, civilians can't be here. Come on, cut it out with that voice, hot shot. You really aren't great at it. Elita-1 crossed her arms, and the Autobot in front of her couldn't help but shyly lose his composure. You come across like a kid trying to act all grown up. Just stay out of my way, Elita. I've been working with the Royal Guard for a few weeks now, and I'm still getting the hang of things. Hotshot grumbled, making sure his superior and leader of the Royal Guard, Ultra Magnus, wouldn't catch him in the act. A leader who sets really high standards and is quite strict. Elita couldn't help but smile at her friend's reaction, who just didn't seem to grow up. But she found herself missing another person who always hung out with Hotshot, someone who was always so full of energy. Do you know where Smokescreen is? That fiery person. That guy is like a runaway train. He didn't work for the same fees I did. Haha, that's hilarious. Hotshot chuckled, finding amusement in the troubles of his rival and buddy. I heard he's getting assigned to some old rusty bot to learn about respecting authority, but honestly, I don't care. Elita rolled her blue eyes, fully aware that Smokescreen was incredibly driven. It really showed just how good and talented he is, always eager to do the right thing and prove himself. Smokescreen was always ready to jump into a fight, but he'd never put his friends or companions in danger with his reckless behavior. Who is that individual in blue and red? Could he possibly be your boyfriend? Hotshot made a playful remark, unaware that Elita felt a touch of embarrassment from the implication. He is simply a friend of mine. Why does everyone assume that I am his girlfriend? Elita quietly murmured the final words to herself, concealing the truth that she harbored feelings for Orion, emotions that transcended mere friendship. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance. I am Orion Pax. Orion introduced himself with a degree of timidity, as he was not accustomed to engaging with bots of a similar age, aside from Elita and D16. It's a pleasure to meet you. Could you please share your profession with me? Hotshot embraced Orion Pax, intrigued by Elita's decision to follow him. How did you successfully capture her attention? May I inquire if you possess significant wealth? Hotshot spoke quietly, mindful of the potential consequences from Elita. I am employed as an archivist at Yakan's library. Orion spoke softly, prompting Hotshot to regard him with disdain. Is that a librarian? Is that so? Hotshot released Orion from his hold, expressing disappointment in Elita's preference. He resumed his military posture, spear in hand, prepared to defend the portal network with unwavering commitment. Elita, could you please explain your purpose for being here? In summary, this individual overlooked the significance of today, which marks Megatronis' monumental duel against the undefeated champion in the arena. Alita articulated her concerns, clearly frustrated by Orion's lack of attention to detail. I request permission for myself and my colleague to access the arena via the portals. The duel is scheduled for today. How remarkable, and I will be available all day today. Hotshot bowed his head in disappointment. However, this will not occur. If Ultra Magnus discovers that the portal network was utilized for this purpose, he will reduce me to a mere tire. Megatronis is my closest companion. I am able to obtain an autograph for you. Orion presented a holographic image featuring himself alongside Megatronis, also known as D16, with their arms casually draped over each other's shoulders. Agreement confirmed. Hotshot accepted the opportunity without hesitation, even if it meant confronting the current leader of the Autobots. For a devoted fan like him, such considerations were insignificant when it came to obtaining an autograph from his greatest idol. Good afternoon. To clarify, in Transformers Prime, the origin of Optimus Prime and Megatron is presented from Ratchet's perspective. As a fan, it would have been significantly more engaging to explore how that origin unfolded, showcasing various viewpoints leading up to the initial confrontation between Optimus Prime and Megatron. This arc promises to effectively develop additional characters, culminating in the pivotal moment where these two brothers are separated by fate. Prime_Primus Creators, Insights City, Cown Gladiator Arena, Megatronis. Megatronis. The audience erupted in fervent chants for Megatronis, their enthusiasm palpable as they witnessed the brutal spectacle of two gladiators engaged in a deadly struggle. The atmosphere was charged with exhilaration as the combatants fought for survival against the formidable, engineered beasts designed to captivate the crowd. The crowd's fervent calls for the gladiator resonated beyond the arena, reaching all the spectators, while simultaneously invigorating the individual in the dimly lit space below. Kneeling before an image of Megatronis Prime, he sought divine strength, requesting blessings for the most significant day of his life. D16 maintained a focused demeanor, eyes shut, fully immersed in his prayer, disregarding the calls of the worshippers invoking his alias. As an outstanding fighter, he was among the select few who enjoyed exclusive privileges, including a private room where he dedicated a significant portion of his day to meditation and study. D16's room was minimally decorated, yet it maintained a commendable level of tidiness. Within its confines, a few notable items stood out, including a shield marked by battle scars and an assortment of combat weapons such as extra hammers, clubs, and swords. Nonetheless, the items of greatest significance to him were not the weapons, but rather delicate, unassuming silver orbs, which, upon initial inspection, appeared to lack any remarkable qualities due to their plain appearance. The orbs represented books, each one narrating ancient tales and holding secrets and strategies that D16 utilized to thrive and endure in the arena for decades. Having been a slave his entire life, he never had access to such resources, but an unexpected alliance with a particular archivist ultimately provided him the chance to not only gain knowledge about Cybertron, but also to endure a harsh destiny that led many to their demise. D16 developed a keen interest in Cybertronian history and holds a deep reverence for the original primes, particularly for Megatronis Prime, whom he admires and invokes daily before engaging in arena battles. Megatronis. A visitor has arrived, a guard stated brusquely, holding a key to unlock the cell. You are aware of the regulations. D16 opened his eyes, revealing a striking blue hue. He sighed wearily and stood up, his impressive height of 10 meters overshadowing the guard, who stood at 7 meters. D16 extended his arms, anticipating the guard's handcuffing, eager to reunite with his old friend, Orion Pax. D16 began as a modest 6-meter robot, not particularly remarkable at first. However, as he navigated the challenges of the arena and garnered attention, his form evolved with each injury. Through numerous repairs and reconstructions, he transformed into a nearly divine entity, possessing the strength to potentially overpower even a Royal Guard Autobot. D16 despised the chains that bound him during his attempt to rescue a friend, who tragically lost his life at the hands of a tyrannical Autobot and was sentenced to perish in the arena before a vast audience. However, D16 seized control of his fate, transforming the arena, once a site of his impending execution, into a grand spectacle. He eliminated all obstacles in his path to survival and gained admiration for his strength, captivating the Cybertronians with his eloquent speeches following each victory, while boldly challenging the corrupt High Council of Cybertron. He possessed an extraordinary presence, commanding respect and admiration from onlookers, fans, and rival gladiators alike, leading many to believe he was the embodiment of Megatronis Prime, the Prime of War. Despite his elevated status, he was ultimately relegated to the role of a mere slave and a gladiator fated for death. Despite any desire to flee, he was constrained by the collar encircling his neck. This collar served multiple purposes. It provided tracking capabilities, delivered severe shocks that could induce fainting, and, most critically, it obstructed his T-cog, rendering his transformation ability unusable. This was a prolonged ordeal that forced gladiators like him to conceal themselves from others. Upon D16's arrival in the visitor's area, he encounters his longtime friend, Orion Pax, who is patiently awaiting his presence. This brings a subtle smile to his face, as he had anticipated being late. "I assume Alita brought you here from the library?" D16 inquired, contemplating why Orion had not arrived earlier. "She compelled me to engage in unlawful activities solely for the purpose of providing you with support." Orion spoke with a hint of discomfort, displaying signs of embarrassment and a touch of guilt. "It is fortunate that she treats you in such a manner. Many women prefer not to visit the library, let alone consult an archivist engrossed in his reading." D16 dismissed the remark, prompting Orion to roll his eyes in response. Orion folded his arms and regarded D16 with a keen gaze, assessing whether he exhibited any signs of nervousness, as the significance of the day weighed heavily on them both. "Are you prepared for this, my esteemed colleague? I have anticipated this day for many years. Success is imperative at this juncture." D16 tightened his fists in determination, conveying his resolve to his friend without uttering a word. "Following all my past actions and inactions, today stands as the defining moment of my identity. I have come across information indicating that an individual named Invictus Maximus possesses considerable strength. However, my knowledge about him is limited." Orion expressed concern, lacking detailed knowledge about Kain's current champion, primarily due to his aversion to gladiatorial arenas and the unwarranted violence they exhibited. "Rest assured, Orion, today marks the conclusion of Invictus. Victories as my sword will decisively end his reign." D16 asserted with confidence, standing tall and prepared to confront the ultimate outcomes. He observed Orion's discomfort with his previous remark, given his pacifist disposition, and opted to shift the conversation to a topic of mutual interest. "Have you discovered any additional records pertaining to the ancients?" Orion Pax's demeanor shifted in response to D16's remarks, reflecting a notable change in his body language. "5 days ago, I discovered something intriguing while reviewing the IACON files stored in the facility." He retrieved a concealed orb and presented it to his friend, who was instantly intrigued by the potential insights into history it might reveal. "Could you please specify the time period associated with this file?" D16 observed the orb, recognizing its greater wear compared to the others, seeking any wisdom it might impart, a practice he consistently engaged in as night enveloped the skies of Cybertron. "This is the final record of Megatronis Prime and the Knights of Cybertron prior to the Eclipse mission." Orion provided a detailed explanation, leaving his friend both impressed and further intrigued by the file. "I wasn't able to review the entire record, but I trust you have a greater appreciation for it, given your status as a fan." "I appreciate your assistance, Pax." D16 discreetly transported the small orb, concealing it carefully to prevent the guard from discovering and destroying it. "Before you leave, I would like to make a request." Orion raised an eyebrow in surprise, as his gladiator friend seldom made requests due to his sense of pride. "How may I assist you? Would you like a specific file?" "I currently do not require any files. I would like you to focus on this fight." D16 observed Orion's tension but chose to further clarify his request. "Should circumstances align favorably, I will have the opportunity to advocate for my freedom publicly upon achieving the status of champion." A politician by the name of Soundwave has indicated that if there is a collective demand for my release, I may finally be able to depart from this location due to the influence of social pressure. I acknowledge your perspective. However, I am weary of witnessing this level of violence. Orion exhaled, acknowledging his friend's request with a sense of comprehension. Additionally, I experience a strong sense of discomfort when I view it. I have a comprehensive understanding of your position, my friend. Kayan's political landscape exemplifies a significant issue within our flawed political system. This arena serves merely as a diversion for the Cybertronians, diverting attention from the numerous issues that surround us. D16 advanced a few paces and gazed upward at the corroded metal ceiling. I wish for you to witness my journey towards regaining my freedom, and when we meet again, I will do so with the perspective of one who is truly free. He elevated his arm with a clenched fist, prepared to engage with Orion. Orion observed his friend's clenched fist and offered a supportive smile, gently bumping his fist in encouragement. I undertake this in the spirit of our friendship, Megatronis. D16 smiled, expressing gratitude to his friend for the support, and observed that it was the first occasion Orion had referred to him by his alias. Upon exiting this arena, we will transform the world, collaboratively. D16 approached the arena with deliberate steps, guided by the illumination from the entrance, a threshold from which many who ventured forth did not come back. His silver armor shone brilliantly as he heard his name called out amidst the rhythmic beating of drums, signaling the excitement of his arrival. D16's blue eyes briefly shifted to red as he observed the gladiator Invictus Maximus, renowned for his 4 arms. The golden armor he wore shone brilliantly in the sunlight, while he wielded 4 golden swords, each inscribed with the names of those deemed worthy of being slain by them. Let us observe the duration for which you can maintain your head in that position. D16 quietly positioned himself, adopting a defensive stance. Location: Crystal City suburbs. Crystal City, regarded as the most aesthetically pleasing city on Cybertron, was established to accommodate the planet's most exceptional and innovative thinkers in technological advancement, serving as the cradle of Cybertronian science. Despite being one of the largest cities in Cybertron, it faces challenges typical of major urban areas, with one prevalent issue being the illicit smuggling of technology or compromised energon. While energon serves as the essential energy source for all Cybertronians and is expended in significant amounts annually, this does not imply that its quality is uniformly pure across the entire population. Cybertron is an expansive planet, with the entirely pure energon traversing through its core. This process sustains the planet and creates the conditions necessary for life to emerge annually. However, if it is discovered outside the core, its purity is considerably diminished, resulting in the establishment of a monopoly in the illicit trade of high-quality energon. This factor contributed to the establishment of the caste system on Cybertron, exacerbating the disparity and oppression between the affluent and the impoverished that emerged following the Age of the Primes. With the rise of smuggling activities in Crystal City and other significant urban areas, the Royal Guard was compelled to deploy a substantial number of Autobots to ensure order and safeguard the community from gangs and mobsters engaged in the export of energon. Undoubtedly, this created opportunities for certain Autobots to engage in organized activities aimed at profiting from the illicit trade, thereby exacerbating social inequality and fostering deep resentment among the public towards the Royal Guard. While many members of the Royal Guard genuinely sought to safeguard the populace from corruption, sacrificing their lives for the sake of peace, there existed a peculiar realm where circumstances diverged. In this neutral territory, the conventional notions of good and evil held little sway, and activities such as illegal trading, fighting, or threats were met with strict consequences. This section of the neutral zone housed a modest bar situated in a less than pristine alley, safeguarded by various criminals from multiple factions while their leaders were present. The establishment, referred to as the Bar, bore a straightforward name for such an extraordinary venue. Alpha Trion, adorned in a substantial hood that concealed his entire form while exposing only a portion of his visage, navigated the alleyway familiar to both criminals and Autobots. His impressive height of 12 meters instilled a sense of intimidation among the criminals, prompting some to yield and allow him to proceed, while others, more audacious and confident, readied themselves for a potential confrontation. Alpha Trion observed the criminals, and his mere presence caused them to retreat in fear, as if their very sparks could be extinguished with a single thought from him. Upon entering the bar, he observed the inviting atmosphere, where numerous patrons enjoyed energon-infused beverages and nibbled on small energon cubes as if they were appetizers. The ambiance in the bar was charged with anticipation and enthusiasm, as patrons expressed their excitement while observing the live battle between Megatronis and Invictus Maximus on a holographic screen, each placing bets on the outcome. The sole employee present was a woman standing at an impressive height of 8 meters. Her armor, though worn and marked by scars, still exuded a distinct wild beauty that captivated the attention of the men around her. She carried a long plasma rifle at her waist, capable of effortlessly eliminating a Royal Guard Autobot with precision. Alpha Trion approached the bench and took a seat quietly, disregarding the wary looks directed at him due to his stature. His gaze briefly shifted to the holographic screen as he observed the self-proclaimed Megatronis engage in a fencing match with Invictus Maximus, successfully severing one of the champion's forearms in a remarkable display of strategy. That young man exhibits a fighting style reminiscent of Megatronis Prime. Alpha Trion spoke softly, almost to himself, as he awaited the attention of the sole employee present in the establishment. He recognized the impressive skills of Megatronis, noting a remarkable talent in the art of combat. He is remarkable in every aspect. The attendant promptly approached Alpha Trion, retrieved several cups from the shelf, and then regarded him, inquiring which energon concentrate he preferred. "We offer energon with purities of 5%, 10%, and 20%. Which option would you prefer?" She became quiet upon recognizing the hooded man, instinctively grasping her plasma rifle with her left hand while maintaining a composed and serious expression. "Prime. It has been quite some time. Second Commander of the Knights of Cybertron, Pulver." Alpha Trion spoke softly, ensuring only she could hear, which heightened her tension further. With unwavering resolve, she swiftly drew her weapon and positioned it directly in front of Alpha Trion, the faint sound of charging plasma resonating as she prepared to fire. "I must ask everyone to exit the premises immediately." Her command caused a palpable tension among all present, including the crime bosses. "However, we are currently observing the most exciting segment of the match." A statement made by an unidentified individual engaged in unlawful activities. "If you wish, I can assist you in determining the outcome of the fight." "If I were to send you to the Allspark." Pulver issued a threat and utilized her aura to ensure that all patrons, except for the Prime, vacated her establishment. "It appears you have maintained your condition over the course of millions of years," Alpha Trion remarked, displaying a sense of calm despite the gun being mere inches from his face. "For over 100 million years, Alpha Trion. Now tell me why a damn Prime is here in my bar." Pulver issued a grave threat, poised to eliminate the final Prime on Cybertron. "Do not assume that I am intimidated by you. You have consistently demonstrated the least strength among your brothers. I find it difficult to dispute that reasoning. I would appreciate a beverage," Alpha Trion stated with a calm demeanor, lowering her cloak to unveil her face, aiming to ensure she did not feel threatened. "Even if I were at full combat capacity as I was in the past, your actions since returning to Cybertron have been quite ordinary. You have upheld your neutrality to a degree that exceeds my expectations, so I find no basis for judgment at this time. It is clear that you have committed yourself to moving forward and embracing a life of anonymity." Pulver lowered her weapon and secured it at her hip, trigger cocked. She then selected a bronze-colored metal cup and filled it with energon, still processing the unexpected presence of a Prime in her establishment. "Upon observation, it is evident that you are significantly diminished, likely operating at half your capacity or even lower. Currently, I possess only a tenth of my original strength. However, it stands to reason that we are equal in strength at this moment." Alpha Trion spoke abruptly, accepting the cup from Pulver and taking a small sip to sample the contents. "The decor of this establishment is quite appealing, reminiscent of the bar at the Knights of Cybertron headquarters. I would appreciate it if you refrained from mentioning the names of my colleagues." Pulver expressed her displeasure, crossing her arms, remaining both irritated and cautious. "What is your request, Alpha Trion?" "I am reaching out to request your assistance." Alpha Trion exhaled deeply, expressing his thoughts with a noticeable sigh. Have you considered reaching out to the High Guard for assistance? They are capable of handling all your needs. Pulver expressed her disdain with an unmistakable air of sarcasm. Are they not the esteemed guardians who are prepared to sacrifice their lives for the greater good? I don't require a soldier, I seek a knight. The prevalence of corruption makes it challenging to determine whom to trust. Alpha Trion responded, displaying a hint of concern. I will no longer accept assignments or directives from primes. Pulver threatened, clenching her fists as if to punch Alpha Trion in the face. I request this favor not in my capacity as a prime, Pulver, but as a fellow Cybertronian. Alpha Trion observed the nuanced surprise in Pulver's body language and chose to proceed accordingly. I am here to request that you reaffirm the oath you took long ago. This is not merely for the sake of an old man like myself, but for the future of Cybertron. Pulver's body tensed momentarily, her fists clenching as an old frustration stirred within her. She felt an instinctive urge to respond to a mission deserving of a knight, a sentiment she resented, perhaps stemming from a lingering appreciation for the nostalgic past she had once embraced. I am unable to proceed with that, considering the circumstances that have transpired. Pulver stated, bowing her head slightly, with a hint of sadness in her tone. I am unable to fulfill this request. Among all the dedicated and honorable knights, your enthusiasm for saving Cybertron stood out the most. I have made errors in the past, and my brothers have also made errors. Alpha Trion acknowledged, his eyes closing as he reflected on the past. We should not allow the past to dictate our identity, instead, we must draw lessons from it to enhance our future. This is a critical moment, failure is not an option. We must recognize that this is our final opportunity, and time is of the essence. What actions must I take to bring this to an end? Pulver inquired, not with the aim of providing assistance, but driven by curiosity. Regardless of our actions, the ultimate outcome remains unchanged. However, we can strategically position the elements to enhance our chances of preserving our world for the future. Alpha Trion retrieved an object and set it on the table. The object began to undergo a transformation, increasing in mass and revealing its true form, prompting Pulver to step back as she identified the relic. Star Saber. Pulver spoke softly. What would you like me to do next? I request that you transport the Star Saber and additional relics to a distant planet, one that is currently primitive and biologically focused, lacking significance at this moment, yet will be vital for the future survival of our species. Alpha Trion provided an explanation, choosing not to disclose specifics about the future as he continues to examine how events will develop. A precautionary step to ensure his survival as the war approaches its catastrophic peak. Ensure his safety. Whom are you referring to? Pulver inquired, gradually persuading herself that Alpha Trion was indeed being truthful. The fate of the Allspark will depend on your actions if you proceed with this. Alpha Trion stated with a gravitas that was more commanding than his usual tone. Observing how Pulver swiftly tensed, her skeptical expression transformed into that of an experienced warrior. Have you considered handling it on your own? Pulver inquired, seeking to validate her uncertainty while examining Alpha Trion for any indication of deception. I lack the time to transport the relics to another galaxy, and my absence will be observed by the High Council. Therefore, an individual such as yourself, who operates outside of official channels, will have no difficulty departing the planet. Alpha Trion acknowledged his situation, seeking assistance from Pulver. I can only entrust you with the relics of the primes for this task, as the other relics remain with me to prevent any suspicion. Pulver exhaled deeply, positioning herself against the counter and regarding Alpha Trion with a serious expression, clearly conveying her indignation. You primes certainly possess a remarkable ability to persuade. Very well, I will assist you, as this is a mission to safeguard the Allspark. I continue to hold strong negative feelings towards you and your siblings. That is entirely reasonable, Knight of Cybertron. Alpha Trion expressed her condolences to Pulver, a woman who embodied the tragedies of the Great Wars during the Age of Primes period. City. Count Gladiator Arena Invictus Maximus was held by both arms of D-16, elevated like a trophy, utterly defeated and humiliated. D-16 delivers a decisive blow, cleaving the champion's body in two, as energon cascades over his silver armor, marking his ascension as the new champion of the Count Arena. D16 lifts the head from the corpse of Invictus Maximus, showcasing it as a trophy for all to witness his remarkable achievement. He lets out a triumphant roar that resonates with the audience, creating an unforgettable image that will be etched in this location forever. For Cybertron, D16 proclaimed loudly, tossing Invictus Maximus' head into the audience as though it were a trophy for the fortunate individual who could seize it and claim it as their own. Orion Pax stood beside Alita-1 in the stands, deeply engaged in a swirl of emotions. While he felt a sense of happiness for his friend's victory, he also experienced feelings of disgust and disappointment regarding the violence that he found difficult to endorse. It was disheartening to witness life being treated with such negligence, where lethal actions faced no consequences, particularly when the community celebrated such savagery. The sight of the Cybertronian population applauding such brutality highlights a significant issue facing Cybertron: the deep-rooted social inequality and the normalization of violence within society. This unacceptable situation cannot continue. It is inappropriate to celebrate someone's death and to treat their remains as a trophy for exhibition. Orion experienced a wave of nausea and needed to step away from the bleachers to collect himself as he distinctly heard the crowd chanting Megatronis' name. Alita-1 observed Orion's discomfort and chose to accompany him in an effort to alleviate his unease. She understood that he was inherently averse to conflict and that it was remarkable for him to consent to observe his closest friend compete in that brutal arena. She observed him positioned against the wall, eyes shut, attempting to erase the memories of not only Invictus Maximus's demise but also the sight of his friend committing such a brutal and inhumane act. Alita-1's lack of an uncomfortable or indifferent reaction can be attributed to her training at the High Guard Academy, where she was prepared to protect Cybertron and developed a tolerance for violence. However, she ultimately decided against pursuing a military career upon recognizing the deep-seated corruption within the ranks, leading her to abandon her initial aspirations. While Alita may not typically exhibit the assertive demeanor she once possessed, she was certainly perceptive enough to recognize that Cybertron was experiencing a period of significant decline. It was evident to her how many bots remained oblivious to the surrounding issues, satisfied with the meager offerings they received. For her, the individuals who distinguish themselves on Cybertron are those capable of illuminating the paths or sparks of others through their actions, guiding them with their words, while simultaneously comprehending the hidden aspects of their sparks and drawing out their best qualities. In her spark, that represented the essence of leadership, a quality that Cybertron was missing. Alita observed Pax and assisted him in regaining his composure. She was unfazed by the vulnerability he occasionally displayed, as he consistently expressed his thoughts with sincerity. He was a bot genuinely dedicated to helping others, a quality she appreciated, as he refrained from judging people's pasts and consistently sought to recognize their best attributes. "It's all right, Pax. Just take a moment to steady yourself." Alita offered a reassuring pat on Orion's back to provide him with comfort. "I apologize, but I am not particularly skilled in this area." Orion acknowledged the situation and closed his eyes to regain his composure. "I am not inclined to pursue it. You have accomplished more than you realize. There is no need for concern simply because you were unable to witness the entire confrontation. You have consistently provided him with support and guidance. In many respects, you have acted as his mentor." Alita smiled, recognizing that Orion Pax is an exceptional bot to meet. "At times, I find myself wishing for the strength of D16. Orion acknowledged, somewhat sheepishly, that he found it challenging to observe his friends fight without occasionally averting his gaze to avoid witnessing the intense confrontation. There are various forms of strength, including physical strength and the inner strength that one possesses. Alita placed her hand on Orion's chest, indicating his spark. One does not need to exhibit strength to embody it. Having faith in individuals is a profound strength that surpasses common perception. If you had not provided your support, he may not have achieved his current level of success. While I recognize D16's impressive capabilities, I must confess that I experienced a moment of discomfort upon seeing his expression. It felt as though my old friend was momentarily absent. Orion acknowledged, briefly lowering his gaze and fixating on the ground with a contemplative expression. Orion has endured that difficult situation for decades, you may not fully grasp the extent of his suffering. D16 will bear scars that cannot be healed, scars that will alter him permanently. It is essential to support him and remind him that he is not alone. Alita offered a supportive smile, which prompted a grateful smile from Orion in return. Before the two resumed their conversation, the shouts of the crowd resonated in all directions, growing increasingly fervent, as these were the moments when D16 or Megatronis delivered their renowned speeches to win the hearts of the people. Cybertronians, how long will you remain deceived by the shadows of the High Council? It is widely understood that these arenas are established to prevent any potential uprising against the governing authorities. They seek to undermine our resolve, aiming to render us powerless and incapable of standing up for our rights. D16 proclaimed, commanding the attention of his audience with his authoritative words, his figure stained with the blood of the former arena champion. Since I began advocating against our corrupt government, there have been numerous attempts on my life. A multitude of adversaries who compromised their principles to align with this nefarious scheme. Orion Pax and Alita -1 returned to the stands, taken aback by the unexpected silence of the audience, as the sunlight highlighted D16's silver armor, creating an impressive sight that draws the attention of all who behold it. I will not be subservient to them. I will not be an instrument in this system of unethical practices that allows our fellow human beings to suffer and perish daily. D16 elevated his sword, allowing the sunlight to reflect off its blade. I assure you all that I will be the sword, the instrument designed to sever the foundations of malevolence. I will not confine myself to this arena, I will advocate for Cybertron. In the manner of the ancient primes. The expressions on the faces of the Cybertronians upon hearing this final statement evoked a profound emotion within their sparks, reminiscent of the feelings they experienced when Megatronis addressed them. Together, we can protect our home and support our fellow citizens. It is imperative that we emerge from the shadows and strive for progress. D16 extended both arms in a demonstration of strength, pausing briefly to catch his breath. Awaken, Cybertron. Stand firm against those who seek to oppress us. I am prepared to advocate for you beyond these arenas. Megatronis. Megatronis. D16 raised his sword and pointed it towards Iacon, presenting a commanding figure for all to witness as a liberator, a warrior destined to unite Cybertron. He permitted himself to close his eyes, absorbing the sound of the audience chanting his name, a profound sensation that instilled a sense of power within him. However, it was time to pursue freedom, to exit this arena on his own terms. Release Megatronis immediately, an enthusiastic individual called out, attempting to engage the audience to participate. Release Megatronis. Release Megatronis. Release Megatronis. Orion Pax observed with a sense of satisfaction as his friend declared his freedom, bolstered by the enthusiastic support of the populace. The powerful rhetoric had the potential to rescue Cybertron from its current state of deceptive tranquility. As the crowd raised their fists and declared D16's freedom, one anonymous Cybertronian stood quietly, aware that he could now approach the High Council to advocate for D16's release and initiate a new revolution. Cown Gladiator Arena Jail. The guards swiftly attempted to detain D16, stop him from speaking more, and escort him to his cell following his stirring address to the populace. He did not fight, exactly because he wanted the public to see him and sympathize with him to hasten the process of his release. Sadly, he couldn't talk to Orion Pax, but he was aware his buddy had done all in his power to see his triumph and would soon be allowed walk the streets as a free man. With a simple click of a small button, D16 released a digital file in front of him depicting a fuzzy image of Megatronis Prime alongside several other robots by his side, from a little metal sphere he had carefully packed with him. I admit I'm fascinated. Let's see what mystery this file holds. Reading the file, D16 sat on the floor and put his back against the wall. It wasn't too large to keep him occupied all night, but it was something fresh to discover. Initially, he disliked studying about the past, but as his nights grew dull and tedious, learning about his planet's history became a chore that prevented him from succumbing to the savage insanity of that horror. File. During the age of the primes, great cities were built to accommodate the population that was born in large numbers thanks to the Allspark. But as the years passed, it became necessary to create a dedicated group of warriors capable of providing order and security to Cybertron, the infamous so-called Knights of Cybertron, composed of warriors, adventurers and the most talented Cybertronians who had proven themselves worthy to serve directly under the Primes, an army of 50,000 elite warriors. Reading about the Knights of Cybertron, true warriors committed to balance, Megatron grinned. The old guard were only a fake dishonoring the memory of Cybertron's actual defenders. The High Council would have no influence if the Knights were alive now. They would have been brought to punishment long ago for their corrupt deeds. Peace has been established for thousands of years, a time of unity and the creation of new species like the Minicons, Titans, Insecticons, Combiners, and the vast and powerful Predacons. Evil always lurks in the shadows during peace. Once more the Primes' tenacity was put to the test as the Quintessons struck. D16's eyes narrow in recognition of one of the most terrible moments in Cybertronian history, a darkness-driven destruction pushing Cybertron to its limits. Based on the documented research of the Quintessons, they were biological creatures with access to technology that could compete with Cybertron. How did the Quintessons acquire such sophisticated technology if they are a younger race than the Cybertronians? This is a section of the narrative that doesn't logical. D16 wondered. Even his buddy Orion Pax had not found this in the IACON records. Though individually powerful, the 13 Primes now had to battle to save the people from the relentless, brutal assaults of the Quintessons. Though the 13 by alone could eventually win the war, they could not endanger the people's safety. The Knights of Cybertron not only guaranteed a more equitable fight but also managed to safeguard the people and the cities. Yet, this time left a significant scar that formed the remainder of Cybertron's past. Looking at the images showing this historical era, D16 could sense some respect in his eyes as he wondered how things had evolved from that glorious age to the present, a shadow of a wonderful past. While the past might expose sorrow, it also shows the emergence of heroes. Among the Knights of Cybertron, there was a group established by the elite of the elite, fighters so strong and proud that they obeyed only their master, Megatronis Prime, 100 warriors who had acquired the secrets of the Primes, commanded by an unknown creature. Feared even by the Quintessons, this band of fighters was called the Decepticons. Decepticons, the moniker sounds nice for a gang of fighters. D16 praised the name's seeming power. With the war against the Quintessons over and their banishment from the galaxy itself, only 2,000 Knights of Cybertron and 60 Decepticons survived, along with a war-torn Cybertron. Though Cybertron would be extremely exposed to more assault and it would take time, the Allspark strength might fix the harm. D16 couldn't help but smile in respect as the Decepticons nearly towered over the other Knights, and he felt much more respect for Megatronis Prime, who knew how to employ his own army efficiently without incurring a negative impact on his soldiers. D16's grin, though, started to fade as he looked at the final surviving transcript. At an unspecified period during Cybertron's rebirth, a group of Decepticons was dispatched to a colony where an entity slaughtered them all. This angered Megatronis Prime, who set out with his surviving Decepticons to see what had befallen his troops called the Eclipse Mission, after which the file began to fail. The file lacks completeness. Seeing the file only sent so much data, D16 grumbled. Though it provides a learning opportunity, this is somewhat disheartening. Only silence accompanied his head resting against the wall. Though he couldn't picture a life other than the one he had, he gazed at the cramped walls surrounding him. A warrior and survivor, he wept for his freedom. Strange as how time has gone, how habitual his existence based on this arena has become, and just now he had a deeper introspection of himself. Getting up from the floor, D16 stared at his reflection on one of the walls and saw two faces. One was actually D16 the slave and the other was Megatronis the warrior. Who am I? Who am I meant to be? Looking at his hands, he shut them firmly, coming to a resolution in his spark. I have to unite everyone under one command to save Cybertron from destruction. I have to be as great or better than the Primes. I have to become a prophet to uplift the people in a new world. D16's intuition told him who was on the other side as footsteps approached his cell, so he knew the moment of a fresh beginning was about to start. His cell opened to see none other than his strange buddy, now a somewhat silent bot. Soundwave, you were faster than I expected. D16 said. Soundwave's response was a modest nod. He set the tiny orb beside the others after taking it in his hands. Our previous talk has been on my mind, and I can only see one method to permanently restore Cybertron. Though he stayed mute, Soundwave listened and focused on D16's following remarks to find out what his last conclusion was. For he had invested all his last trust and effort into preserving Cybertron. Fighting for the people is pointless. We must let them know their life has meaning, thus we must provide them a goal, a life mission. They must believe in me if I are to guide them against the High Council. D16 stated, his voice growing more commanding with every second. But not everyone will accept my words only on a simple promise. I have to prove I am more than deserving of their confidence. Soundwave's visage displayed a picture of a golden object, like a diamond, a legendary artifact that no one knew where it was, only the High Council knew, the matrix of leadership. Should I show myself deserving of the matrix of leadership, I could lead Cybertron as Prime and have all people follow my beliefs without hesitation. D16 gazed at his reflection beneath the metal and envisioned a wonderful future for himself. I have to show that my beliefs merit consideration. We have to push the administration to summon an assembly to choose a new Prime. Doing so would allow us to transform Cybertron into a new age and abolish the High Guard feeding their corrupt authority. Stepping out of his cell, D16's eyes momentarily became red to reflect his will and desire for power, ready to display the will of a gladiator who would not let his head to be bowed like a puppet. D16 traversed the corridors for the first time in years, experiencing something more than just walking into the arena where he had established his name. He paused one step away, one tiny step from crossing a red line placed on the floor, before going through the main gate. He waited a few seconds until the collar around his neck split in two, dropping to the ground and shattering on impact. D16 had to pause to sigh, for the first time experiencing the freedom he had been seeking, his body at last howling for freedom and change after such a long period. He simply stepped over the red line, which for a time looked like an incredibly tough choice for his very strong body. Practically oblivious of his presence, he gazed at the walls and saw the automated turrets, armed to kill a fleeing gladiator, were not turned on. Ha 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 ha. This is what freedom feels like. Ignoring how Soundwave was observing him, D16 raised his arms and gazed up at the stars in the starry sky. Soundwave, I have to see a friend before we begin transforming our globe. Tomorrow and we shall start. Soundwave nodded, knowing D16 required a time to appreciate his newly found freedom. Not even he could conceive how terrible it must be for a Cybertronian to have his inherent capacity to morph taken from him for decades. A fighter that rapidly crossed the sound barrier, D16 transformed into his vehicle mode by leaping a few feet off the ground and running for a few seconds, releasing an internal roar in the air as an internal roar that had been kept for so long was unleashed. IACON, the city IACON library. Tired from riding the train from a city as far away as Kaun, Orion Pax went back to the IACON library. Though he couldn't congratulate D16, he was aware his buddy was keen to finally experience the freedom he had longed for. Orion was keen to see his friend outside the Kaun arena tomorrow morning, since the major story of the moment was that a great gladiator would finally be released from the arena. Until the scheduled time for his friend's release came, he would make use of some time to study in the library. Though Alpha occasionally threw him out for overdoing it, Alpha believed him to be responsible and had one of the library keys, so he could occasionally remain up all night studying. Orion anticipated seeing Alpha writing or studying papers when he unlocked the door and entered the hallways. Instead, he found another quite regular guest there. Ratchet, what brings you here? Orion inquired, astonished to find Yakun's most renowned physician in the library at this time. I'm just studying in my leisure time. And where have you been? Ratchet inquired, his attention drawn to the holographic files holding a wealth of medical knowledge. It's rare to see you outside the library. I've been watching the gladiatorial arenas, or trying to. Orion admitted, little ashamed. Those barbaric arenas disgust me. Treating life as a mere game offends me in many ways. Ratchet looked at Orion Pax for a time, neglecting his studies. I thought you hated going to the arenas. I just support D16, he's my friend, You know that. Orion took a step closer, noticing the intricate language and visuals that explained Cybertronian biology. Why are you studying the same medical books? For the same reason you enjoy studying the history of IACON, even though I know every letter and symbol in those files, I feel I can improve a little more by rereading them, even if that improvement is insignificant. Ratchet confessed, shutting off the hologram of a document. Where's Mr. Alpha? Is he writing at his office? Orion inquired, noting the absence of the cranky old man who served as his father figure. Alpha T. Cough cough. Alpha told me he was going to take care of some business in Crystal City and would be back by morning. Ratchet responded, almost giving Alpha Trion's real identity to Orion, but fortunately, the young librarian bot did not notice his error. Ratchet is an old robot, and his age corresponds to his experience, thus he was well aware that the former city librarian was one of the 13 primes, who had retired owing to Cybertronian politics and by choice. He knew the former prime had retired from his duties, but that didn't mean he had nothing to offer. In fact, when he discovered that the former librarian was Alpha Trion himself, he decided to learn from him, at least in the areas of medicine and history, and it is clear that Alpha initially denied his true identity, but he eventually admitted it and they became friends. Ratchet, as a physician, understood how Cybertronian biology worked, and he knew that, depending on age, any bot could present complete physical changes in its body or not to symbolize maturity in its form, but that was entirely up to the Cybertronian. He was aware that Alpha Trion had decided to appear considerably older than he had been depicted in history when his powers were at their pinnacle, so that no one would identify him even if they saw him personally. Despite Ratchet's friendship with the former prime, Alpha Trion avoided discussing his past, realizing that even a god was troubled by his own past. Ratchet recognized Alpha Trion's lost face as that of someone carrying a lot of guilt in his thoughts, unable to forget the past, which is why he always avoided talking about the other primes, his brothers. So Mr. Alpha left you here alone to take care of the library? Orion inquired, already knowing the response. I don't mind, I like being here, it's a very peaceful place to study. I can't imagine spending a lot of time with noisy people, I'd probably die sooner from stress. Ratchet grinned at the corner of his mouth, not wanting to say more than he had to, despite the fact that Orion Pax was someone with whom he could speak quietly. Orion understood Ratchet's way of thinking. He enjoyed reading and learning, therefore he understood how aggravating it was when someone stopped his reading. Ratchet, I've been thinking about this question for some years. I intended to consult Mr. Alpha, but someone as knowledgeable as you could clear my uncertainties. Ratchet raised an eyebrow at Orion Pax, knowing the young man in front of him was relatively wise for his age. Is there a question? If I can respond, that's fine. As I've done more research in recent years, I've grown increasingly concerned about Cybertron's path. I feel like we're all in a giant barrel about to explode. I feel like a war is about to break out, and all it will take is one simple push, like a game of dominoes, to bring everything crashing down. Orion whispered, observing Ratchet's silence, and agreed with his statement. Let us say, if you had immense power, would you use it to start a revolution or to avert a disaster? I admit that this is a rather complex question, given our current situation. Ratchet folded his arms, his gaze drifting to the library ceiling as if looking for an answer. It's a really complicated topic, Orion. Power in the hands of those who already know strength can lead to disaster, whereas power in the hands of the weak can lead to greatness since they understand the sensation of weakness but are not immune to greed, which leads to the same conclusion. Everyone has fantasized of wielding tremendous authority, making choices, and leading Cybertron to glory, but it is a hefty weight. A heavy burden. Orion was astonished. Carrying people's hopes, Orion, is a hefty burden. Expectations of you might produce undue strain and emotional imbalance, distorting your thoughts and sinking you into your own avarice, unaware that you are changing so much that there is no return without losing everything that once characterized you. Ratchet glanced at Orion with a solemn expression that showed his lengthy existence. To carry hope, to boost the will of the weak, to accept numerous decisions and duties, and to be willing to humble oneself in order to protect the vulnerable. People with these attributes should have the power to transform the world, people of integrity who uphold their convictions without endangering others. Do you mean you never wish you had the ability to change the world? You're a great doctor who saves lives every day, you fulfill those descriptions. Orion said as Ratchet shook his head, dismissing the compliment. This is my answer to your question. Orion, it is not a matter of who I want to have power, but rather who should have the power to transform our planet. Ratchet smiled, seeing the apparent surprise that Orion could not conceal. I am saying that Cybertron needs a leader in whom we can place our trust. And who should we put our trust in? Orion inquired, his innermost misgivings pouring out of his spark until he remembered someone he considered a sibling. D16 fits that description, maybe he. No offense, Orion, but I don't see your friend as someone who could save Cybertron. Ratchet swiftly interrupted Orion. Your friend had lived in darkness for many years and saw violence as a means of survival and an answer to all of his questions. Maybe I'm wrong, but every time I see him battle, I see an executioner eager to punish, not a guy capable of carrying the burden of millions. Orion was angered by Ratchet's portrayal of his friend, but he knew Ratchet was a demanding doctor who did not condone violence, so his assessment of D16 made sense. So, how would we know who the right person is? Orion inquired again, feeling intricate doubts sink into his soul. A person may become a warrior when forged in battle, but a true leader is born with a noble heart. Ratchet couldn't help but smile as he noticed Orion pondering his words, attempting to grasp the viewpoint he was sharing with him. Power cannot be obtained via desire, but rather by necessity. Those who are worthy of power are those who are always willing to fight injustice, no matter how difficult or impossible the task may be. Orion remained silent for a few seconds. He grasped Ratchet's theory, which he agreed with, but he did not deny that it was ideologically driven and out of touch with reality. It is uncommon for someone so noble to exist. Carrying everyone's hopes on your shoulders and rising up to safeguard them is a display of sheer willpower. He smiled. It was an unachievable fantasy, but it was worthwhile to hope and believe that one day someone with such resolve will arrive. Listen, Orion, the leader I want for Cybertron must already exist among us, I believe he does. Ratchet placed his hand on his chest to symbolize the spark. But he may not be here yet. He then placed his fingers on his head, indicating the mind. Just as warriors are forged, true leaders are revealed in the face of adversity. You are very wise, Orion acknowledged, recognizing Ratchet's wisdom. I'm just an old man who believes in a better future for everyone. If we stop believing, we are no different from mere machines. We are Cybertronians, and our spark is proof of our individuality and existence. Ratchet spoke proudly. Remember, Orion, we are defined by our choices, not the will of others, so I believe that one day one person will be worthy of carrying the hope of all on his back. After a few minutes, Ratchet reorganized the files he was using and bid farewell to Orion Pax, deciding whether to return to his home or the hospital. He was never bored, being someone who does not know how to spend his free time doing anything other than work. Orion was so preoccupied with Ratchet's remarks that he couldn't focus on analyzing the numerous files in the library. With his head full of anxiety, he walked the steps to the terrace, where he could see the entire beauty of Iacon, including the neon lights gleaming on the buildings, creating a stunning contrast to the magnificent metropolis. Seeing the city from this angle, it looks perfect, but... Before Orion Pax could continue speaking, he heard the sound of an aircraft flying at great speeds, breaching the sound barrier. He noticed that the fighter was silver in color, which reminded him of the hues of an old buddy. The D-16 approached at high speed, flew over Orion, then quickly rose to high altitude to transform into humanoid mode and landed near Orion, using its legs to cushion the impact, unconcerned about the height to which it eventually fell, as if it were a pattern that would become habit in the future. So this is the famous Iacon library. As you told me it was a gigantic golden building, there was no way I could have mistaken the place. D-16 smiled as he saw the astonishment on his friend's face. I thought you couldn't be released until tomorrow morning, Orion said, recovering from his surprise. My release came sooner than I expected. The good thing is I don't have to worry about the paparazzi for now. D-16 scoffed, glancing to the side as his blue eyes briefly took in the beauty of Iacon. But he didn't let it sway him. even now that he was free. After all, this was the city where his true enemies reveled at the expense of the people. When did you learn to fly? Orion asked, looking genuinely surprised. Just a heads up, you know you can't fly without a license, right? I've always been into flying, I just don't feel the need to flaunt my wings to prove it. D16 crossed his arms, brushing off Orion's warning. Those guys blocked my ability to transform, and now I'm planning to use it like never before. IACON has a bunch of rules about flying bots, so there's a good chance you might get hit with a fine. Orion saw D16 tense up for a second, and it struck him as ironic. He had just managed to break free, and here he was, already facing the possibility of paying taxes to the government. Next time, I think it might be a good idea for you to go with a ground vehicle mode. Humph, give up my ability to fly. Never thought about it, but if I could pick a vehicle mode, I'd probably go with a tank. D16 admitted, pondering for a second whether it would be worth it to have a vehicle mode, something that could complement the weapon built into his right arm. IACON Library. D16 was really impressed by IACON's huge library. It was incredible to see how many files were available, definitely a treasure trove of knowledge for a lifetime. I get why you can spend so many hours just lost in your books. D16 chuckled, just looking to tease his friend. So, how many files have you gone through? I've probably read as much as you've trained or battled in the arenas of Kaon, so. Orion chimed in, cutting off the conversation. I get it. I can see why you do that. I get that. I'm all about breathing, dreaming, or just thinking about the fight too. It seems like all you ever think about is books. D16 admitted that, even though he and Orion were different, they shared some similarities that made him feel a sense of sympathy for him. We're pretty odd bots. Orion crossed his arms and chuckled at his own predicament. Did you get a chance to read the file? He asked, thinking back to their last time together in the arena. Yeah, before I got my freedom, I took the chance to read it, but unfortunately, the file was incomplete. D16 mentioned while strolling through the library, he noticed that a few areas could use a good cleaning. The files about the end of the war with the Quintessons and the conclusion of the Prime's age aren't very accurate. Finding these files or making copies is such a hassle, isn't it? Orion sighed, feeling frustrated as he struggled to uncover more files to bridge this gap in Cybertronian history. I've asked Mr. Alpha a few times if he has any info from back then, but he always seems to get annoyed when I mention it. Seems like your mentor is quite the grump, D16 said, trying to make sure his friend didn't feel down. The info here is really insightful and definitely worth paying attention to. I honestly don't think I'd be here if you hadn't introduced me to the fight against the Quintessons. Those files were packed with military strategies that I really put to good use. Orion felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that his friend had openly acknowledged how he had contributed to his survival in that dangerous arena, even if it didn't seem like a big deal. Their friendship started off a bit unusual, and it evolved in a unique way over the years, leading them to trust each other like brothers. I've never really said this, but I just want to thank you for sticking by me. D16 expressed gratitude, leaving Orion in awe of his genuine nature. There's a part of him that he only shows to those he completely trusts. He reached out his arm with an open hand, ready for a friendly handshake, just like brothers do. Happy to help. Orion shook D16's hand back, showing the mutual respect they had for one another. But now, no more deadly arenas. I really don't like the pressure of waiting for the results of your fights. I love how optimistic you are about bots, but just a heads up, it's important to stay cautious. Sometimes that positivity can make you a bit too relaxed around the risky ones. D16 gave a pretty clear heads up about some stuff he experienced in the arena that the audience didn't get to see. You know, you're kind of like an older brother to me. I mean, it's not like you're going to take that cannon and shoot me just because you're having a rough day, right? Orion gestured towards the cannon that D16 had slung over his arm. It didn't see much action in the arena, since most gladiators had gotten pretty good at deflecting energon shots with their melee weapons. Haha, The only thing that can really get me riled up is a game of chess. You just can't seem to chill when you get all hyped up. D16 gave a sneer, flashing his teeth. The two brothers were playfully teasing each other when they suddenly heard heavy footsteps coming closer, making a little echo in the library. D16 instinctively tensed up when he heard and felt the footsteps approaching. He could clearly see that something heavy was coming his way, making him tense up and reach for his sword. D16's battle instincts took over, turning Orion's warnings into just background noise. He sprinted forward, sword in hand, ready to take down anyone his instincts warned him about, convinced they could be an enemy sent by the High Council to take him out. Hold on. Orion tried to grab his brother, but he just couldn't get there in time. D16 swung his sword, a heavy weapon honed to slice through nearly anything with a mix of raw power and finesse. Yet, Alpha Trion effortlessly halted it with just 2 fingers, treating the whole thing like it was no big deal, as if it wasn't even a life-threatening move. D16 was completely stunned, his eyes wide with sheer terror and disbelief. In all his time as a warrior, he had never faced anyone who could stop his attack so effortlessly, especially not with just their fingers. He gazed into the eyes of the towering 12-meter-tall robot, a giant that few could match in height, and noticed those blue eyes gleaming like a deity gazing down at a mere mortal. Alpha Trion was caught off guard. If his instincts as a warrior and prime hadn't kicked in just in time, it could have been a deadly hit. It was almost like a flashback to his power and skill when he was at his best, even if just for a fleeting moment. If this attack had happened at another time, whether days or years ago, he likely wouldn't have been able to respond so fast. It was quite fortunate for him, really. I'm really sorry, Mr. Alpha. Are you doing all right? It was just an accident. Orion hurried over and noticed his teacher, who was also like a father to him, casually letting his friend's sword fall, almost as if he didn't care about the tense moment unfolding. No need to stress, it's just a little cut on my fingers. Alpha Trion glanced at the fingers he had used to block the attack and noticed a tiny cut on them. This kid is definitely tougher than an elite Autobot, and with some practice, he could even hit the level of a knight. As he glanced at D16, he realized he was looking at the famous gladiator who had really captured everyone's attention. So, you're the gladiator known as Megatronis, huh? Alpha Trion said, glancing at D16 with a hint of curiosity. Who are you? D16 felt the tension in the air, his instincts kicking in, telling him that the robot standing before him was no ordinary opponent. It had been ages since he felt this heavy weight, like he was stepping into the arena to fight for his life all over again. Just chill for a sec. He's my teacher, the owner and founder of this library, and the one who writes all the manuscripts and archives of Cybertron. Orion attempted to lighten the mood, putting aside the fact that his teacher had intervened in D16's impulsive move. So, a librarian? D16 said, almost in disbelief at what he was saying. Can a librarian really be that strong? Sure, if you put in the effort. Alpha Trion chimed in, doing his best to ease the tension. He started to realize that the whole thing was just a mix-up. I'm really sorry, I acted on impulse when I saw you there. D16 admitted, feeling a bit embarrassed for letting his warrior instincts get the best of him. Now that he got what his senses were picking up, it was clear this librarian was something special, not just your average bot. I've been feeling a bit stressed out these past few hours, so maybe your warrior instincts have kicked in because I'm around. Alpha noticed the surprise in D16 and Orion Pax's eyes and quickly came up with an excuse. Back in the day, I went through some pretty intense battles, so I've picked up a few tricks and have a good grasp on the basics of being a warrior and how to handle myself. No need to say sorry, a silly mistake like that doesn't really matter. Everyone's fine. I had no idea you used to be a warrior. Orion was taken aback by this surprising revelation about his mentor's life. You know, I'm just a grumpy old man who's been around the block a few times. Alpha said and headed to his office, leaving the two of them to enjoy the library however they wanted. Orion noticed his mentor walking into the office and shot a quick, slightly annoyed glance at D16. You might have harmed someone who didn't deserve it. I've already said I'm sorry. Plus, your teacher isn't exactly a pushover. The way he stopped my attack so easily seemed pretty routine for him. D16 kept an eye on the room where Alpha walked in, struggling to rein in his instincts. His mind was like a sword. Once it was drawn, there was no going back. Is it possible for a librarian to hold that much power? That's quite an interesting twist, isn't it? Mr. Alpha doesn't really share much about his past. I can tell he's been around for a while, and he's got a lot of secrets tucked away in his mind. Orion responded, still feeling concerned about his mentor. I've known him for a long time, and I get that he tends to steer clear of discussing the past because of some lingering resentment. So, it was quite a surprise when he opened up about it today, definitely a rare moment. A warrior who chose to exile himself now lives a quiet life as a librarian, trying to keep his past at bay. D16 was feeling pretty curious and a bit suspicious about who this bot really was. Who do you think this old man might be? IACON Library. Orion Pax and D16 really enjoyed their time together, chatting about the stories they each loved the most. D16 really enjoys hearing about war stories and legendary warriors who accomplished amazing things, which he admires as a gladiator. Orion Pax had his own unique tastes when it came to culture and life. He was really into scientific discoveries and the myths of the past, which clearly showed his love for history. This passion gave him a deeper wisdom than you might expect from someone his age. So, they started chatting about one of the saddest times in Cybertron's past, the war with the Quintessons. This period saw the creation of technologies like the Portal Bridge and the development of military strategies that laid the groundwork for the Royal Guard, the group that keeps Cybertron safe today. I'm a bit confused about one part of this story. How did the Quintessons manage to develop their technology so fast? D16 asked, picturing the intense scenes of this confrontation in their mind. I never really got this detail either. I came across records saying that the Quintessons were a primitive civilization that would have taken millions of years to develop their own technology for space travel. Orion grabbed another file and highlighted it, revealing an image of countless Quintesson ships making their way to Cybertron's orbit. So, when they came at us, it was like they had this massive army that outnumbered all the Cybertronians combined. Can a population really explode? Do they reproduce that quickly? Some organic species have been described, you know. D16 had a theory, even though they weren't exactly an expert in that area. I've come across some info suggesting that certain organic species can reproduce. But when you look into Quintessonian biology, it seems like they take quite a while to reach adulthood. Plus, their planet didn't even have the setup to support so many births. Orion pointed out the image of a green Quintesson, which had tentacles and two faces where its head should be. You know, with the 13 primes in the fight, they could take out tens of thousands in just a few days. It always puzzled me how the Quintessons managed to keep outnumbering us. It's all about quantity versus quality, right? The Cybertronians can keep this battle going for thousands of years, while the Quintessons, they only stick around for a few hundred. But those pesky ones have always found a way to outnumber us ridiculously. D16 thought about what it would be like back then, picturing himself taking on the Quintessons and coming up with his own strategies. These thoughts really fired up his fighting spirit, and then, just like that, an idea popped into his head. What do you think would happen if the Quintessons could clone themselves? Is there a method to make soldiers that can just be thrown away? Cloning seems like a cool idea, but I haven't come across anything that shows the Quintessons actually have the tech for it. Orion Pax mentioned, quickly glancing through some files to double-check. Having all those massive ships around in such huge quantities really requires a big and well-organized team. If I'm not mistaken, a bunch of those mineral-rich planets got wiped out, didn't they? D16 remembered this detail, thinking back to how the war led to the destruction of hundreds of planets as it spread beyond Cybertron, where things had been stuck for a long time in other parts of the universe. Absolutely, the Quintessons used up a ton of resources on various planets, particularly those that could support life. You know, the big reason we managed to beat them was definitely Energon. If the Allspark hadn't been pumping out Energon all the time, Cybertron might have ended up in a really bad spot. Orion thought it through and figured out what might have happened. It turned into a contest to see which civilization could tap into the best energy source. Sadly, this is what Cybertron has become today. D16 muttered under his breath, his tone heavy with frustration. It's a real shame that we've ended up with Cybertronians enslaving other Cybertronians. Orion stayed quiet for a moment, sensing his friend's unspoken fury and noticing his fists tightly clenched in anger. You know, D, wars are just that, wars. There really aren't any winners in the end. The age of the Primes wrapped up right after this conflict, and even the mighty Primes can't escape the fallout from wars. Orion was doing his best to cheer up his friend. When the age of the Primes came to a close, a lot of people saw a chance to rise up, some with good intentions and others not so much. And we all witnessed what happened next. You know, if the Primes had decided to strike the Quintessons when they were vulnerable, our reality would look different from what we've gone through. D16 admitted, his voice laced with anger. They really should have gotten rid of them, like a bad disease, ensuring that no outside civilization could ever pose a threat to Cybertron again. So, you're saying this is genocide? Orion's expression turned serious. He wasn't a fan of where D16's thoughts were heading. He got why his friend was angry. The effects of the war are all mixed up with their lives today, even after so long. I get where you're coming from, but wiping out every species in the universe just because we're scared of them attacking us feels like a way to justify wars everywhere. It turns us into conquerors and tyrants. One of the smartest things we can do to keep our home safe is to stop threats before they even start. D16 responded, feeling a bit let down by Orion's refusal. We'd be just like the High Council, Orion said, his voice getting a bit louder. We'd just end up repeating the same issues we deal with now, and that would be pretty hypocritical of us. The best way to defend yourself is to go on the attack, Orion. If we bow down to potential threats, we're just opening ourselves up to some serious weaknesses that can be taken advantage of. D16 responded, sharing his thoughts openly. You're really good at a lot of things, but sometimes we have to go all in and not give the other side a moment to catch their breath. It feels like we'd just be going in circles forever, right? How many Cybertronians need to be sacrificed before we can finally find peace? Orion asked, meeting D16's gaze without a hint of concern about their height difference. D16 frowned and thought about how to present the same argument from a different angle. How many Cybertronians need to fall before we can actually fight back to safeguard our freedom and bring about peace? The two locked eyes for what felt like ages, each holding their unique perspective on things. They were both right in their own ways, but they also had their share of flaws and gaps in their ideas and beliefs. Still, they were united by a common goal, the protection of Cybertron. Orion let out a sigh, coming to the conclusion that this was a pointless discussion. The Quintessons hadn't been around for ages, so why bother fighting over something from way back when? Let's not argue about things like that. Instead, we should come together to stand up for our rights against a shared opponent. D16 nodded, seeing where Orion was coming from, even if he felt a bit let down that Orion didn't quite see things his way. You're spot on. Our shared challenge is right in front of us, and if we team up, we can really make a difference in our world. With my strength and your smarts together, there's nothing we can't tackle, not even taking down Unicron. Orion Pax chuckled, finding his brother's effort to lighten the mood a little too much. Wait, did we just take down a god together? We need to keep it real, but I really appreciate your enthusiasm. We are who we want to be, and our actions shape us. To save Cybertron, we need to tackle the impossible together. By combining our talents, we become an unstoppable team. D16 placed his hand on Orion's shoulder. Even though they had their differences, he really wanted his friend and brother there with him for support. As the two exchanged apologies, Alpha Trion, busy encoding one of the Omega keys, did his best to tune out their chatter, thanks to his always alert enhanced hearing. He was still trying to figure out whether to just toss the Omega keys onto the planet, where his visions hinted that Cybertron's fate was on the line, or to trust Pulver, the last Decepticon he knew was alive, with their safety. The Omega keys, when brought together, unlock the pure essence of Primus's power. This is a force that's often steered clear of due to its destructive potential. It mirrors the creative abilities of the Allspark, but only for the one who wields it. It's the same kind of power that brought the War of the Primes to an end, right before the Allspark's defenses were breached. He has to trust a power to the Prime he saw in his vision, a completely new Prime he had never met before. All he knows is that this Prime had a battle mask and a tough gaze, someone who Primus deemed worthy to take on the leadership matrix. Alpha Trion tuned into the chat between D16 and Orion Pax, and it struck him how much they reminded him of Prima Prime and Megatronis Prime. It was like looking at two reflections of the same goal, even as they debated the best ways to get there. He let out a sigh, feeling a bit on edge about the vision he had seen. He wasn't quite sure what to do or how to steer clear of whatever was coming, but one thing was clear: his planet was headed for trouble again. Remembering the past, the age of Prime's Temple of 13 in a big city that's all about gold, there's this huge platform floating above the buildings, thanks to some cool levitation tech. It's such an impressive sight that you just can't miss it. A 14-meter-tall robot, decked out in all-white armor with golden accents that make it look almost divine, kept a watchful eye on the city from above. It stood right at the edge, showing no signs of fear about losing its balance. He turned his head to the side when he spotted another robot coming his way. This one was a massive 15 meters tall, decked out in striking purple armor with golden accents. It had a powerful and imposing presence that would make most people hesitate to even glance at it. If you're thinking about jumping, just give me a heads up right away so I can call the cleaning lady to take care of things. Megatronis Prime let out a scoff, clearly aiming to get under his older brother's skin, something he had definitely perfected over time. If I'm not around anymore, who's going to look out for you? We'd be lost if you acted on every thought that pops into that head of yours. Prime shot back, clearly upset with Megatronis Prime for how he acted during the meeting with the other Primes just a few hours earlier. You really came off as an asshole in that meeting. I get where you're coming from, but I can't let this slide. It feels like we'd just be repeating what Unicron did. We're not like Unicron, we're better than that. We can't put our planet and these bots at risk. Danger is out there, and we can't let your fear of starting a war hold us back. Megatronis Prime saw his brother clenching his fists and figured he should keep going. We managed to take down Unicron without stressing over the side effects, but now that so many bots are counting on us, are you seriously going to gamble everything we've worked for just because of your beliefs? Every life is important, my friend. You've witnessed it firsthand. We really can't just toss one life aside for another. They all hold the same value. Cybertron represents that idea, where life can start anew after the chaos has settled. Prima looked at his younger brother and had to tilt his head back to meet his gaze. I just can't bring myself to go to war with a civilization that's constantly changing. I can see your obsession and fear of the future. It's something you can't really hide from me. I don't have any weaknesses, my friend. Have you forgotten that my powers just don't work? My body was built for battle. It's the tool I use to help maintain peace on our planet. Megatronis Prime said, crossing his arms in a way that really made him look powerful. Your body can adapt to just about anything, evolve, and find ways to get stronger. Unicron was no exception. He could evolve and adapt too. But what really made the difference in our victory was that Unicron was alone, while we stood together as one warrior, in sync with a shared goal. Prima Prime was ready to explain things, wanting to teach his reckless brother a thing or two. Unicron's reign slipped away from us, showing that we're not invincible. But you know, when we're divided, we're not as strong. But when we come together, we can really make waves, even in the universe. So, I'm not worried about any threats to Cybertron. I just ask you to trust me a bit. Megatronis Prime blinked in surprise at Prima's words, feeling a bit frustrated by the way they seemed to box him in. He had to admit, Prima really knew how to use her words, but he was feeling a bit uneasy about whether things were actually under control, especially after what Quintus Prime had shared with everyone at the meeting. What if you're mistaken? Megatron Prime asked, sounding a little serious and curious. All right, go ahead and punch me in the face. Prima teased with a hint of mockery in his voice. I heard those rumors you started about being able to take me on one with the knights. Megatronis Prime let out a snort and smiled, sensing that the atmosphere was shifting to a more laid-back vibe. I could take you down with just one arm tied behind my back. Honestly, it would take a whole team to make it a fair match. Megatronis Prime let out a scoff. Are you thinking about bringing Vector Prime onto my team? Prima Prime crossed his arms, watching Megatronis tense up, fully aware of just how powerful Vector Prime could be when he was at his peak. I'd much rather deal with that idiot Onyx Prime throwing a fit in his dragon form than Vector Prime swinging that sword around. Megatronis Prime shuddered at the thought of what might happen if he had to go up against the Prime who could mess with time. It was a pretty scary idea. Are you scared? You're not the amazing Megatronis Prime. Prima Prime put on a big, dramatic voice just to get under Megatronis's skin. You really don't have much of a moral compass, do you? You've got this amazing sword that can cut a star in half, and somehow, you let some teenage Predacons take it from you. Megatronis Prime couldn't help but tease his brother, bringing up that embarrassing moment, especially since Prima had been trampled by those furious Predacons more times than he could count that day. He loved to relive that memory while having a few drinks at the bar with his knights and some friends. Are you up for some dirty play? Do you want me to remind you about that time you got really drunk and admitted you liked Solus Prime? I have to say, your poems really have a romantic vibe to them. Prima Prime made a playful jab, and for a brief moment, Megatronis was caught off guard, feeling a bit embarrassed. Come on, you said you wouldn't bring it up. Megatronis was working on getting himself back together. They both started laughing, then quieted down to take in the stunning sight of Cybertron, appreciating its beauty and grandeur, never thinking that one day this view would turn into pure hell. Alpha Trion leaned against the wall, keeping an eye on them from afar. He was worried they might end up throwing punches that could seriously wreck the whole temple with the force of their blows. He let out a sigh of relief, realizing that he wouldn't stand much of a chance if it came down to a fight between them. Just watching the two of them team up and unleash their techniques to trap Unicron in that final attack was enough to show how powerful they really were. The end. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this video. I'm thrilled you watched the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe for even more exciting content coming your way soon.